Now, when it comes to art history and the types of art, we can divide it into two categories, pre-Islam and post-Islam. Now, pre-Islamic art influenced post-Islamic Iranian art, specifically from the Sasanian period, such as, for example, the use of Iwans, arches, or the fire tower temple structure. Now, the major Iranian Islamic dynasties are the Ghaznavids, Seljuks, Khwarezmids, Ilkhanids, Temurids, Safavids, Qajar, Pahlavi, and finally we reach the Islamic Republic of Iran. Now, what is very important to note is that the socio-political cultural environment of these dynasties had direct impact on the type of art and the extent of their flourishment within these periods. The ideology, prosperity, stability, power structure, and success of a dynasty would have had a direct influence on the type of art that thrived within that period of time. Architecture, painting, and music had direct relations with the power and interest of the ruling dynasty, because they would need either state patronage or patronage from the elite of the society. Now, when looking at the major dynasties, for example, the Ghaznavids did not sponsor the arts as much as the other dynasties. And this was because, one of the reasons for it was because ideologically they were surrounded and advised by radical Sunni theologians. And because of this, and due to the Iranian political movement against the dominance of the Arabs, this period produced one of the most influential and masterpieces of Persian literature, the Shahnameh of Ferdowsi, or the Book of Kings. Now, Ferdowsi's work was greatly supported and appreciated by the masses, contradictory with Mahmud Ghaznavid, who did not support the production of the Shahnameh. Now, as an example of a dynasty in which various art forms flourished extensively, we can look at the Safavid dynasty. Now, art during the Safavid period shows the most unitary development when compared to any other dynasty that ruled Iran. This was due to the creation of a central government, which was supported by skilled bureaucracy, which united Iran as a single cultural entity. Architecture, calligraphy, manuscripts, paintings, and textiles flourished extensively during this period of time. Patronage also went beyond the courts and the elites and included merchants and officials as well. Now, the art produced during this period impacted also the neighboring dynasties such as the Mughals and the Deccani Indians, as well as the Ottomans. Another vital flourishment during the Safavid period was the growth of artistic individuality. The anonymity that had characterized earlier Iranian art was largely abandoned. Architectural inscriptions were signed, manuscripts bore the names of painters, illuminators, and calligraphers. Textiles were provided with the names of their designers. And also differences in individual styles also became more readily apparent. And originality became as prized a feature as adherence to traditionalism. Now, an example that we can look at an example of Safavid architecture that we can look at is the shrine of Sheikh Safieddin Ardebili in Ardebil, Iran. This is northwest of Iran. Sheikh Safieddin Ardebili was the founder of the Safavid Sufi dynasty, and his great-great-great-grandson, Shah Ismail, established the Safavid dynasty. Now, what we're looking at here is part of the monument. The monument is composed of various different structural buildings. This is the Dar al-Huffaz, or the Hall of Reciters. Now, what is exceptional about the Dar al-Huffaz is that it's a combination of various art forms, such as we have calligraphy, mogharnas, plaster work, tashib, and then we have various geometric, floral, and vegetal motifs in various color schemes that decorated the interior of the Dar al-Huffaz to create a sacred ambience and sacred space for both the reciters as well as the people who visited the shrine. And what is very important to note about the shrine of Sheikh Safieddin was that it was created and expanded throughout 4 centuries, from 13th century to 17th century. Now, the greatest expansion and renovation was done during the coming to power of the Safavids, and especially during Shah Abbas and Shah Tahmasp's time. And they not only wanted it because this was their ancestral shrine, so they wanted both the religious authority of the shrine to come through as much, and as well as for it to represent their both political, religious, and imperial power. That's why they spend so much effort, and they hire the best artists to do their best work at their ancestral shrine. Now, a second example is Sheikh Lutfullah Mosque in Isfahan. Well, you guys, I'm sure, will go and visit both of these places whenever you go to Iran next. Now, Sheikh Lutfullah Mosque is in Nakhchivan Square in Isfahan, and it was built between 1603 and 1619. And it's named after Sheikh Lutfullah, who was a prominent religious scholar and teacher. He was also the father-in-law of Shah Abbas. Now, the mosque is more similar in structure to a mausoleum rather than a 4-Iwan mosque. And the whole mosque is covered with multicolored elaborate tile work. And compared to the whole structure of the Nakhchivan Square, it's very small in structure. It contains one dome chamber, which we'll see later on, which is surrounded on all the sides by rooms, and a portal Ivan overlooking the square. Now, the concept of a color and light, which I will discuss later on in the following section, have been used beautifully in Sheikh Lutfullah Mosque. Now, as you pass through the main portal of the mosque, you enter a very narrow corridor, which, as you can see, is decorated with multicolored tile work depicting vegetal, floral, and geometric motifs. And what is very important about this corridor is that the only light source in this corridor is through the window that you see right at the end. That's the only light that's coming through. So when a visitor enters it, they've entered a dark corridor, and this light coming at the end is showing the pathway. As you go further down in the corridor, there's another set of windows at the end showing the direction to the visitors to come through, and finally they enter the dome chamber of the mosque. This is a partial view of the dome chamber, which again is colored with some of the most exquisite Safavid tile work of that period, and there are calligraphic inscriptions. You have a exquisite Shamsa motif in the apex of the dome, and a row of geometric windows below the dome. And now it's a question that comes later on how, for example, why were such motifs used within architecture? What is it trying to represent? The colors used, the calligraphic inscriptions, the use of light and void, which is a discussion for later on. Now, another type of art that we can look at is paintings of that period. Now, miniature painting was one of the most prominent paintings that happened within that period of time. And Behzad of Herat is perhaps the most famous historical miniature painter of the period. And Behzad, though, worked during both the Taymurid period and the Safavid period. He himself was a painter, and he was a leader of a workshop, and his disciples produced work under his leadership and stylistic directions. Behzad was skilled at depicting natural and organic human movements in his work, and he brought realism into Persian miniature painting rather than stiffness in presentation. He furthermore introduced great naturalism to Persian painting, particularly in the depiction of more individualized figures and their use of realistic gestures and expressions that we can see here, on the top right corner. You see the two figures. Now, this miniature painting was done in 1488. It's called The Seduction of Yusuf and Zulaykha. It's done during the Taymurid period, not the Safavid period. And the story of the seduction of Yusuf and Zulaykha is based on Quranic verses. This version is based on the version of Bustan Sa'di. You all know Sa'di very well, I'm sure. And what's very important about this miniature painting is that you can see the intricate details in showing all the staircases, the different doorways where, again, like for example, these doorways may implement, it depends, like Sufi, the 7 stages of a Sufi spiritual journey, etc. And when you look at the figures as well, you see how Behzad is showing very delicate movements and facial features of the figures that he showed, which are Yusuf and Zulaykha. Zulaykha is on the right and Yusuf is on the left. Now, the story of the seduction of Yusuf and Zulaykha deals with 2 points. One is the battle between the carnal soul and the peaceful soul, meaning the nafs amara and the nafs mutmainna. And the second battle is between your ego and worshipping God. Throughout the miniature painting, we have calligraphic inscriptions. A part of these calligraphic inscriptions is this poem, which I'll read to you. It goes as this: نیاسای از جانب هیچ کس، برو جانب حق نگهدار بس. چنان شرمدار از خداوند خیش، که شرمت ز بیگانگان است و خیش. زلیخا چو گشت از می عشق مست، به دامان یوسف در آویخت دست. چنان دیو شهوت رضا داده بود، که چون گرگ در یوسف افتاده بود. بتی داشت بانوی مصر از رخام، برو معتکف بامدادان و شام. در آن لحظه رویش بپوشید و سر، مبادا که زشت آیدش در نظر. غم‌آلوده یوسف به کنجی نشست، به سر بر ز نفس ستمکار دست. زلیخا 2 دستش بوسید و پای، که ای سست پیمان سرکش درآی. Now, this verse and also the depiction of Yusuf and Zulaykha, how Zulaykha is trying to catch on to Yusuf and Yusuf is flying away, deals directly with the 2 plot lines that I discussed earlier on: the battle between the carnal soul and the peaceful soul, and the battle between egoism and worshipping God. Now, what is this? What is this both painting and these verses are trying to state is that if you surrender yourself to God, you are still from your carnal soul, because it is the carnal soul that tries to lead you into temptation. Now, Zulaykha was not able to control her carnal soul, and therefore her lust for Yusuf, because she was in love with Yusuf, took over and overpowered her, and she wanted to go after him. But Yusuf, because he had surrendered himself to God and had more control over his carnal soul, was able to avoid temptation and control his love and passion for Zulaykha and avoid her at all costs. As you can see him flying away from him, literally he's flying away. Yes. But that's very important to know that, for example, when you are looking at any Islamic Iranian art, whether it is Iranian or whether it's not, there's always a meaning behind it. And that's the reason why I was discussing this in as much detail as possible for right now. Now, rather than going through the other dynasties, I thought best for us to be looking at modern Iran right now, meaning Islamic, after the Islamic Revolution. Now, in the modern era, the art produced during post-revolution of Iran changed directions, and certain modes of art such as cinema, modern painting, photography, sculptures, miniatures, and music flourished extensively. And they focused more on traditionalism, unlike during the Qajar and Pahlavi period, where they were very much influenced by Western art. Now, post-revolution Iranian art can be divided into 2 categories: the Holy Defense period, which basically means the period between the Iran-Iraq War from 1980 to 1988, and the post-Holy Defense War period. Now, during the Holy Defense period, cinema and painting became the most prominent tools to depict political, war-related, social, humanitarian, and spiritual ideologies. Now, 2 of the most famous cinema directors of that period are, one of them is Ali Hatami, 2 of his most well-known movies of that time. One of them is Hezar Dastan, and the second is Kamal al-Mulk. And the second famous cinema director of that period is Ibrahim Khatami Kio, and an example of one of his movies is Didaban of that period. Now, during the post-Holy War period, meaning after the Iran-Iraq War, Miniature sculpture, photography, and music also flourished and became known worldwide, with the artists becoming internationally known. Now, again, within cinema, we can look at Kiarostami for his movies Taste of Cherry, which won the Palme d'Or at Cannes Film Festival, and Close Up, which was ranked in the top 50 movies of all time, and Asghar Farhadi. He won 2 Oscars for both of these movies, A Separation and Salesman. When it comes to miniature paintings, one of the most famous miniature painters of post-revolution Iran is Mahmud Farshjan, he was greatly influenced by Sufi Persian literature. We're going to look at one of his miniature paintings later on. One of the most famous sculpture artists is Parviz Tanavoli. I will show you one of his works. Now, what's important in Parviz Tanavoli's work is fluidity of movement. Now you can see so many different styles of the word heech that he has created. Now the question that arises is that why has Tanavoli chosen the word heech rather than anything else? Heech, as you all know, means nothing. Now there are 3 aspects to the interpretation of the word heech. First is that from an Islamic ontological perspective, God is existence, and we are his manifestation or manifestation of his existence. Second, we annihilate all of our vices, we empty ourselves, and we become nothing. Nothing, again, meaning heech. Now, because of this, we transcend and we become the manifestation of the perfect divine attributes. And thirdly, everything is nothing. It is heech. It passes and it is temporary in comparison to transcendent stability. Now, and any of these can be a reason why Tanavoli chose the word heech himself to be depicted as one of his most famous sculptures. And his sculptures, you can see it in all international exhibitions, in permanent and exhibitions. One of them is at the Aga Khan Museum. And I suggest for you to all have a look at it because it's one of his masterpieces. It's beautifully done. Now we move to more the second part of this, the third part actually of my lecture, that when it comes to interpretive research of Iranian Islamic art or Islamic art, is that the majority of published research in Western academia on Islamic art has been performed through the lens of art history and sociology of arts. For example, scholars such as Arthur Upham Pope, Oleg Grabar, Ettinghausen, they are great art historians, but what they focus more is the sociology art aspect rather than the intellectual milieu of the society which produced the various arts that they discuss and look into. So another approach that we need, which is both necessary and of great importance to the study of Islamic arts, Iranian art, is the employment and utilizations of principles of Islamic philosophy and Sufism, which were the pillars of the intellectual milieu in which a given work of art was produced. Now, this is the third most important principle for understanding Iranian Islamic art. Now, through the utilization of such principles, the qualitative and conceptual dimensions of a work of art can be understood and analyzed. Now, fundamental principles from Islamic philosophy and Sufism that deal directly with art and architecture are light, color, calligraphy, imagination, symbolism, geometry, unity in multiplicity, and multiplicity in unity. Now, the interpretation and commentaries of these doctrines are based on the works of Sufis and philosophers of 9th to 17th century CE. Now, because of time constraints, I'm going to be looking at 3 of these doctrines: imagination, color, and calligraphy. Now, the concept of imagination plays a vital role in any given art form, and it has been one of the major topics of Islamic philosophy and Sufism. Islamic philosophy and Sufism analyze the intellectual foundation of the arts with regards to the degrees of the world of imagination, as well as clarifying the connection and relationship between art, existence, and knowledge. Art and active imagination have an intrinsic relationship. This is the most important aspect of art and gives birth to a masterpiece. The connection between the imagination faculty and the imaginal world creates the means for interpretation of the original concepts behind visual forms of art. The imaginal world and the faculty of imagination have been debated much amongst Muslim philosophers and Sufis. Now, whilst the peripatetic or Mashayikh philosophers such as Ibn Sina do not believe in the existence of an independently existing imaginal world, philosophers of school of illumination such as founded by Sohrawardi and the transcendent school of philosophy founded by Mullah Sadra not only argue for the existence of an imaginal world, but see its existence as necessary for the comprehension between the material world and the world of intellect. Sohrawardi not only argues for the existence of the worlds of intellect, souls, and matters, which is also agreed by peripatetic philosophers, but he also argues for the existence of another world, referred to as the imaginal world or the world of ideas. Sohrawardi considers necessary for the proof of many religious theories such as purgatory and physical resurrection. He is of the opinion that within Islamic ontology, passage from the sensual world to the intellectual world is an impossibility without an intermediary. Therefore, there must be a world that exists between the two and has the characteristics of both, which is called the imaginal world. He is of the opinion that within Islamic epistemology, other than there being a sensual faculty and an intellectual faculty, there's a faculty of imagination which is placed between the two. Therefore, Sohrawardi believes that imaginal forms exist independently outside the world of the soul. And these forms exist neither in the world of intellect nor in the physical world, but exist in the imaginal world, which is distinctly separate from the other two. Ibn Arabi agrees with Sohrawardi's opinion on Islamic ontology and believes that the imaginal world is the connector and intermediary of the world of nature, which is the lowest world, and the abstract world, which is the highest world. He believes that imagination is an intermediary between the abstract intellect and the physical body in the lower world and exists independently in both worlds. He furthermore is of the opinion that the faculty of imagination can comprehend both those matters that have a form and give form or dimensions to matters that do not have a form. Now, whilst peripatetic philosophers believe that the world of intellect is a vault for all the sensual forms and have been seen by the senses and stored in this vault, Ibn Arabi, in complete disagreement, not only denies that the imaginal world is not a vault for the forms of the sensual world, but it is a world in which abstract forms from the absolute world of ideas have been reflected. Now, when it comes to art, the sensual faculties, the faculty of imagination and creativity, are the three of the elements that must be discussed in relation to both an artist and a work of art. Now, by applying both Ibn Arabi and Sohrawardi's ideas in regards to imagination from both an Islamic ontological and epistemological perspectives, we can see an artist can use their imaginal faculty to comprehend abstract realities from the abstract world, and using creativity give them a sensual form in the sensual world. Therefore, they can use, for example, elements such as calligraphy, geometry, and color to implement such ideas and create sacred arts and architecture. Now, to gain access to the higher world and a sacred realm, the artist must first utilize his imaginal faculty, without which he cannot comprehend the sacred and realities of the world of intellect. Therefore, it's essential for an artist to train and develop their imaginal faculty. But what is very important to always note is that it is creativity that separates artists with a very powerful imaginal faculty with one that does not have a powerful sense of creativity. And another very unique aspect of Iranian Islamic art is that not only does the faculty of imagination play an important role in it, but it forces the audience to use their faculty of imagination to understand the realities behind any given form of art that's been produced. Therefore, we can say that the work of art becomes a sign of God because it is a visual and comprehensible representation of the forms and ideas of the world of ideas presented in the sensual world and act as a gateway to the realities of that world. Now, an artist can use his or her imaginal faculty to represent realities, some of which are veiled from anyone's perception or from the world of ideas. So there are multiple layers within any given work of art, and it is the viewer, both the viewers and an artist's capability of whether they can see those layers within that work or create such art pieces. Now, an example that we can look at when it comes to the concept of imagination is a miniature painting by Mahmoud Farshjan, which I referenced before. Now, this painting is called The Evening of Ashura, and it was created in 1976. Ashura is the 10th day of Muharram. It's the day that Hussein, the grandson of Prophet Muhammad, was martyred by Yazid. What happens? Now, what is very important in regards to this miniature painting is that Farshjan has used his own imagination to show the pain and sorrow that the family of Hussein were feeling when Hussein and his comrades were martyred. The horse that you see is Hussein's horse, and the woman is the woman and children who are surrounding the horse and are weeping. And what is important about this painting is that it's a narration of a historical event, but without any direct reference to the event itself. Farshjan has used his own imagination to depict what Hussein's family was feeling and tried his best to show their sorrow and pain through his artwork and to create a feeling of deep sorrow. Now we come to the second principle, which is the principle of color. Now, light and color form the foundations of visual perception, and they play a central role in art and architecture. Now, in the Quran, there are two separate terms that have been used for color. One is in relation to nature, and one is in relation of color to God. The terms are lawn or alwan is plural, and the second is sabqa. The term lawn or alwan has been repeated 9 times in the Quran and is in reference to the multitude of colors found in nature. This is whilst the term sabqa, in contrast, has been used only twice in one verse and is in reference to the color of God. Now, verse 138, chapter 2 Al-Baqarah, uses the term sabqa in this way. It states, Sabqatullahi wa man ahsanu min Allahi sabqatan wa nahnu lahu abidun. To translate, it means we take our color from Allah, and who is better than Allah at coloring? We are his worshippers. Now, the term sabqa that has been used in this verse refers to the absolute color of God, which includes unity, peace, love, and purity, rather than race, gender, sect, and class. An example of the term lawn, which has been used, is in verse 27, chapter 35, Surah Al-Fatir. It states, Alam tara an Allah anzala min as-sama'i ma'an fa'akhrajna bihi samaratin mukhtalifan alwanuha wa min al-jibala judadun bayzun wa humrun mukhtalifun alwanuha wa gharabibu sud. The translation goes as follows. Hast thou not considered that God sends down water from the sky, wherewith we bring forth fruits of diverse colors? And in the mountain are streaks of white and red, of diverse hues, and others pitch black. Now, Qushayri, the 12th century Muslim scholar, interpreting this verse, argues that the reference to colors in this verse illustrates the purposeful craftsmanship of God in sending rain from the sky, which not only validates his existence, but also demonstrates the absolute knowledge of the One. Now another example is verse 31, chapter 18, Surah Al-Kahf, which life after death has been described using various colors. It states, أولئك لهم جنات عدن تجري من تحتهم الأنهار يحلون فيها من أساور من ذهب ويلبسون ثيابا خضرا من سندس واستبرق متكئين فيها على الأرائك. The translation goes, therein they shall be adorned with bracelets of gold and shall wear green garments of fine silk and rich brocade, reclining upon couches. Now Najmuddin Kubra, a 13th century Sufi, combines the notion of colored lights with the various stages or states of a Sufi's spiritual journey. In Najmuddin Kubra's school of thought, the aim of a Sufi's journey is to attain a connection with the Almighty. God is the light of the light, which is the verse of light. Verse of light is famously known as that. And the Sufi, through the ascending art, after the descending art, becomes the manifestation of God's light. Through his journey, a Sufi observes various colors, which are neither accidental in nature nor of the material world, but are reflective of the different attributes and essences of God. Now, I am just mentioning the concept of light here because it's a very long discussion. I haven't brought it in here, but the mosque that I showed you before, the Sheikh Lutfullah Mosque, and the use of, you know, when I explained to you that it is very dark when you go in, there's only 2 windows that show light, and then finally you go into the dome chamber and you're experiencing a lot of tile work and light coming from above. This is the concept of light that gets implemented to show the journey of a visitor or a Sufi or anyone who is open to spiritual movement, that you pass through a darkness and you enter light to attain a connection with the Almighty, which is God. Now, Kubra categorizes the Sufi spiritual journey into 7 stages, with each stage having a specific color which is reflective of his spiritual state. The colors are comprised of white, yellow, green, red, dark purple, and black. Each color has an esoteric meaning. White refers to Islam, yellow is the color of faith and conscience, green the color of identifying and ultimate belief, red the color of mysticism and knowledge, purple the color of emotion, and black the color of bewilderment and ecstasy. He also, Kubra, categorizes the soul into 3 layers or 3 levels. The nafs ammara or carnal soul, which is dark and resembles a dark black circle. Second, the nafs lawwama or self-reproaching soul, which is the same as partial reason and is red in color. And third, the nafs mutmainna or peaceful soul, which is the same as smooth polished mirror in which all lights are observed and is white in color. Now, Najmuddin Razi viewed color as being symbolic of the soul and spiritual attributes of a wayfarer. Najmuddin Razi, similar to Najmuddin Kubra, combines the notion of colored light with the various stages or states of a Sufi spiritual journey. He also gives colors to each level of the soul. The color deep purple is seen in the state of self-reproaching soul, which is symbolic of the combination of the spirit and the darkness of the soul. After the development of the self-reproaching soul, the color red is seen. As the light of the spirit dominates the soul, the color yellow is seen. As the darkness of the soul is gradually destroyed, the color white is seen. And then green is seen as the light of the spirit is combined with the purification of the heart. And finally, as the heart is purified, a light similar to that of the sun is seen. Now, an example that we can look at is Masjid al-Nasir al-Mulk in Shiraz, Iran. I don't know if you have seen photos of this place before or not, but it's one of the masterpieces of Iranian art and architecture, and there's a lot of tourists that go there. You can see all their photos everywhere online, and it's because of this. It's because of this ray of colors and kaleidoscope of colors that you can see. Now this mosque was built between 1876 and 1888, and it is an example of an Islamic monument in which the deployment of light and color has been used not only to create a beautiful environment, but a sacred ambience for both the visitors and worshippers. It is also known as the Pink Mosque, and this is because of the colored glass that you see and the reflection into the interior of the mosque. Now this Shabastan of the mosque is known as Half Dargah, or 7 entrances, and it has taken its name because there are 7 doorways on the western Shabastan, which is covered with multicolored geometric glass windows, and when the sun shines through these glass windows, when it shines through them, a kaleidoscope of color is reflected into the interior of the mosque, and it plays with the multicolored tilework that decorates the interior and creates an ambience of sacredness and beauty, which is again not only beautiful but creates again the means for a worshipper for maybe the departure of a worshipper's soul from the material world into the spiritual one. I definitely recommend that if you guys ever go back to Iran, and if you do go to Shiraz, to go at a time to this mosque where there's a lot of sun and it's going to pass through the window, because it's one of the most beautiful things that you will ever see. Now the third concept that I'll be discussing is the concept of calligraphy. Now within Islamic art, calligraphy is seen as the noblest art form, and that's due to its association with the Quran. Now the importance and sanctity of the written word in Quran, the written word in Islam has been portrayed throughout the Quran. For example, in chapter 96, Surah Al-Alaq, verses 1-2, God tells Prophet Muhammad, "Iqra bismi rabbika allazi khalaq, khalaqal insana min alaq." Recite, "Thy Lord is most noble, who taught by the pen." Second example is chapter 68, Surah Al-Qalam, which starts with Noon, wal qalam wa ma yasturun, ma anta bi ni'mati rabbika bimajnun. Noon, by the pen and that which they scribe, thou art not by thy blessing of thy Lord possessed. Now, the significance of the Quran and the importance of the written word, as stated in the Quran, transformed the Arabic language into the language of an empire. It spread with the Umayyad dynasty from 1661 to 1750 towards North Africa and Iran. And within 3 centuries, it substituted older languages such as Latin, Greek, and Middle Persian. Now, when you compare this to other religious art, for example, in Christian decorative arts, images and paintings depicting religious imagery often derived from the Bible play a significant role. This plays a significant role in both setting the tone of the architecture or painting or whatever form of decorative art it is, but also in narrating a story which sets the mood and tone of the artwork. For example, we can refer to Sistine's Chapel ceiling artwork as an example, which has the overall theme of salvation, and many of its scenes have been derived from the book of Genesis. Now, within Islamic art, text plays a similar function in architecture and decorative arts. It's used to set the tone, mood, and context of the piece of art, although this function, of course, is done through calligraphy and inscription rather than paintings. Now, the Quran is the manifestation of the speech of God, which takes a written form in the Quran and is further transferred and manifested into the physical world by being inscribed on monuments and decorative arts, adding a further element of sanctity to them. An example that we can look at is the Allah Tower, which is part of the shrine of Sheikh Safeddin Ardebili, and inside it is a tower where the Sheikh himself was buried. Now, the exterior of the tower, I'm talking about this section here, you go around. the exterior of the tower is decorated with turquoise blue glazed tile work with the name of God in Arabic written 132 times in Banai or Kufi calligraphy. Now, each Allah inscribed on this wall has been written both vertically and horizontally, and it's 1 meter long so that it can be seen from a distance. Now, the question is why? Why has it been written there? Why in such lettering? Why so big? Now, the word Allah is God's unique name. And according to Islamic Sufism, all other names and attributes of God manifest from this one word. Therefore, Allah is the most holy word used within the Quran, and it has been repeated 3,027 times. And therefore, it's the main zikr of the Safavi Sufi order. Now, well, this is the tomb tower of Sheikh Safieddin himself, who is the founder of the Safavi Sufi order. So it's the best location where the main zikr of the Sufi order would be inscribed on the exterior of the monument, and for it to be seen by visitors and pilgrims from afar. Now, the horizontal representation of the word Allah in turquoise blue on the tower is a symbol of multiplicity, whilst the vertical representation is a symbol of unity. This idea represents the idea of unity in multiplicity and multiplicity in unity, which discuss the relationship between God and world and God. And now, another thing that we can look at is that when we are discussing interpretation and analysis of Iranian Islamic art, you have to look at the various dimensions as stated before. You have to look at the socio-political, cultural aspects that created that work of art, as well as the intellectual milieu of that society, which includes the Sufi and philosophical doctrines that are related to art. Now, a methodology that can be used is hermeneutics. Now, hermeneutics allows us to study a work of art in question, not only as a collection of parts, but by relating the parts to the whole and the whole to the parts. And this is done through the application of the hermeneutic circle. Now, through this, we can achieve a synoptic view, which means seeing together or seeing as a whole. What's important to note is that there are two focal points at play when discussing hermeneutics. It's the event of interpretation itself and what it entails, and the questions arising regarding the nature of interpretation. Now, you can apply hermeneutics to an architectural monument, to a piece of poetry or prose, to a painting. Anything is possible. Now, an example that we can look at is this mihrab. This mihrab is placed in the Iwan Maqsura of Masjid Gohar Shad in Imam Reza Shrine Complex. It was built between 1416 to 1418 CE, and it was commissioned by Gohar Shad Agha, who was the wife of Shah Rukh Khan. This is during the Taymurid dynasty. Now, what we can do is that when we apply hermeneutics to this mihrab, we can interpret the delicate interplay of the specific colors used, the Quranic verses that have been inscribed on the exterior of the mihrab, and the location of the inscription, both on their own and in relation to one another. Now, verses 78 to 84 of chapter 17, Surah Al-Isra, have been inscribed on the border of the mihrab in double line black thuluth and gold Kufi calligraphy on the green marble of the mihrab. Now, as you're well aware, the mihrab is a prayer niche where the congregational leader stands and he leads the prayer. Now, the verses that have been described deal directly with the importance of evening and morning prayer, the need for establishing a connection with God at dawn, the Islamic philosophy of history, which states that truth will come and falsehood will be destroyed. And fourthly, the importance of the Quran as the savior of the believer's soul. Now, the colors of black and gold that have been used in accordance to the inscription and the location symbolize ultimate belief, bewilderment, and ecstasy and faith, according to Najmuddin Kubra. So for anything you can apply, as I said, for example, hermeneutic circle to understand the meaning behind whether it's architecture, whether it's a painting, and you can do that through not only the decorative elements, but bringing in together the socio-political reasons for the creation of that given work of art, the intellectual background to it, the commissioner's reasons, the builder's reasons, what were his thoughts, because what is very important when looking at Iranian Islamic art is that you cannot look at art only from an aesthetic point of view. You must look at what it's trying to represent, what is the meaning behind it, because art is never created just for the sake of beauty. There's always a meaning behind something. Even if you don't see it, there must be something for it. And it's important to also apply a methodology, which it depends on your studies, what it is that you're looking at, but hermeneutics is one of them. You can use phenomenology, intertextuality, etc. I'm going to conclude now, and you guys we can have a discussion. If you have any questions, you can ask, whatever you guys want. So thank you so much for listening.
Dr. Safari, thank you very much for your interesting lecture. I enjoyed every minute of it. You guys, if you have questions, please.
It can be related to this, it can be related to anything other than what I discussed, whether it's Iranian art, Islamic art.
I would also like to introduce our guests. Dr. Safari, for our lecturer, the head of the London Academy of Iranian Studies, from the Islamic Culture Research Foundation. I would like to thank you for this lecture. We are welcome.
Don't feel forced. If you want, you can ask. If not, it's totally fine. We can have a discussion if you want about anything else to art or Sufism or contemporary Iran, anything like. And if not, it's again up to you guys.
I'm sorry if my question will turn out to be silly.
No.
But still, I have it. Besides the scene of murdering Hussein, what are the other popular religious scenes in the Iranian arts?
You mean religious or historical?
Religious.
Well, from what I know, first of all, there's no such thing as a silly question. You can always ask any question you want. Secondly, from what I am aware, because when it comes to religious art, from what I'm aware, the most important paintings that there are about the period of Muharram. Now, whether it's Hussein, whether it's his sons, Ali Asghar, Ali Akbar, or his brother Abbas, but most of them are related to the period of Muharram because that is one of, because I guess my father can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that because Hussein's martyrdom was done in such a horrible way that it has manifested itself to this day and it resonates with our society. And because of this, and because everyone from any kind of background that they relate with the story of Hussein. And because of this, artists portray it as much as possible because everyone can relate to it. Now, I don't know if my father agrees with me or not, he does. But from what I know, it's during the period of, it's Muharram, and it's a depiction of the Hussein and his family being martyred that's portrayed the most when it comes to religious paintings. Because also don't forget that, depicting figures in Islamic art in religious monuments is forbidden in Islam. So we have paintings, but it's outside. So when it comes to that, I believe, from what I know, it's mostly within that period of time that they look at.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Okay, well, thank you so much, you guys, for listening. It's been a pleasure to be here, and thank you again for inviting me. And thank you, Dr. Hadavi, also for organizing it. Mr. Abu Hassani, oh, he's there. Thank you so much for organizing it as well. And thank you all for coming. Thank you. Yes.